What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Thomas, bringing you the latest of the Thomas Take. A One Buffalo podcast started in January of 2016, hosted by MyFantasySportsTalk.com writer Ryan Thomas, myself. The voice you're listening to right now is that of Ryan Thomas, and today is May 15th, 2017, but more importantly, this has been an exciting weekend for the Buffalo sports fans. We have very exciting news from both of our Buffalo sports teams, from both the Buffalo Sabres and the Buffalo Bills. I talked about the Buffalo Bills in the first part of today's show. You can tune into that. Bean has brought company, and that was the title of that episode. This episode is Jason Botterill back to Buffalo. Jason Botterill was named the new GM of the Buffalo Sabres this past week. Botterill has extensive experience with the Pittsburgh Penguins and being a key influence on both Stanley Cup teams of the last 10 years. And Jason Botterill was a guy that was a former player for the Buffalo Sabres, former Rochester American as well, and was a guy that was a key figure in revitalizing the minor league squad of the Pittsburgh Penguins and revitalizing the NHL squad of the Pittsburgh Penguins, of course. So this is a very interesting move for a wide variety of reasons. Botterill was named the front runner coming out of the gate. Tim Murray was fired, obviously. Murray gets fired. Botterill named the front runner according to the national media. Much like with the Buffalo Bills fired Doug Whaley, and Brandon Bean is the front runner right out of the gate. And Terry hires both of the presumed front runners for the job, which I'm not going to say is a good thing or a bad thing. Only time will tell. But it's an interesting dynamic, being that Buffalo usually never gets the guy that is like the front runner, the number one guy that is looking for a GM job. Usually we get the number two guy or the number three guy, or maybe we go out of our own element and bring in somebody else from the outside. So for Brandon Bean to come here, for Jason Botterill to come here, it's very, very interesting. And the statements that Jason Botterill made that I thought were really interesting were in basically cahoots with his experience. His experience is him bringing a winning culture at the AHL level and the NHL level. Really where you're able to excel is when your minor league team is flourishing. Eventually those minor leaguers will become NHL players. Virtually, we're also talking about a guy that is widely respected amongst the national media, widely respected around the NHL. We usually never hear this as Buffalo sports fans. We hear Buffalo's hired GM Doug Whaley, dead air. Buffalo has hired GM Tim Murray, dead air. There is no real enthusiasm for Buffalo hires. Think back right now to an exciting moment where the Bills or Sabres made a hire and the national media gave it a positive reaction. I will wait. All right, the wait is done. See, I told you. The wait is over. You cannot think of a time where the Bills made a positive coaching hire in the last 20 years, or where the Sabres made a positive hire in the last 10. Lindy Ruff was here for a long time. Darcy Regier was here for a long time. The message got stale. They needed to move on. The franchise needed to move on. And Pat LaFontaine, Ron Rolston, Ted Nolan, Tim Murray. It has been a musical chairs at Seymour Knox Plaza in Buffalo, where the KeyBank Center resides today. And hopefully this Jason Botterill move brings respectability to a team that has not gotten out of the basement of the NHL for the last 5-6 years. The Sabres have a playoff drought of their own. They haven't made the playoffs since 2010, 2011, I believe. So they need to break out of this playoff drought. They need to get back to respectability. We saw the Toronto Maple Leafs make the playoffs this year. We saw the Edmonton Oilers make the playoffs this year and go the distance with the Anaheim Ducks in the playoffs. And we had more ammunition than both of those teams combined, and we couldn't get back into the dance. We couldn't get back into the dance. The doors were shut. The principal said, nope, you're not good enough. Basically, I'd compare it to Sabres with a little kid that couldn't go on the ride. They weren't tall enough. That's my analogy of the day. And really, essentially, that was what happened. Tim Murray got all this currency from the Darcy Regier moves and then some, and kind of floundered that ammunition. Whereas Doug Whaley overextended himself and used every which resource that we had for very little return. And that was that situation. These two gentlemen here in Botterill and Bean, Botterill is preaching a message of bringing respectability to the AHL level and the NHL level, and Brandon Bean is bringing we need to bring in the right Buffalo Bills players as opposed to the right players. We need to bring in players that build a culture to this team and make a team that has been basically a laughingstock, a respectable franchise. And that is what the Buffalo Bills have needed for 20 years. So I'm very excited, and one of the top questions that I was asked was which hire am I more excited for? And I'm going to answer that question in the next part of the Thomas Take, so stay tuned. If you want to subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on the YouTube channel at youtube.com. Search in the top search bar, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. You will see the channel. The subscriber list is growing, so thank you to those that have. But feel free to do so if you have not. Also, you can like the Facebook page, Facebook.com/Thomas Takeover is the name of the page. That's the link to the page, the URL for the page. You can look it up that way, and it will be the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Hit like. You'll get every post of the Thomas Take and the articles written by myself. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I will really appreciate hearing some Thomas Take mailbag questions from you all also. So my message for those listening and really want my take on the Jason Botterill hire. I think that was the best hire that the Sabres could have made. Botterill is in his 40s. He's a younger executive, a younger guy that really his message about propping up Rochester was really what I liked to hear. I know that the successful teams of the Sabres in years past had a successful farm team. So that's really where it starts. That the farm system is really important in both hockey and in baseball. And I know that as a baseball fan, and I know that as a hockey fan. So it was a very nice message to hear from a new GM coming in, wanting to bring respectability to the entire Buffalo Sabres operation, whether it's through the Sabres itself or through the AHL team. They work in unison together, and I really appreciated that message that he sent during his press conference. He also talked about who is on the roster currently that excites him. Obviously, Jack Eichel comes to mind, but he also named Ryan O'Reilly, stating the fact that when you have two dynamic centers in this day and age of the NHL, that is a damn good start. Pretty much that's what he said without using the words damn good. And I agree. Ryan O'Reilly, when healthy, is one of the better players in the NHL, and Jack Eichel is a franchise-changing player. So anytime a new hire comes in here with a player of that caliber, that is a good start. And they need to keep him happy. They need to build around him. They need to put him in the right position to flourish as an NHL player. I think they will. I know they will. And really, we're not done yet with the Buffalo Sabres. Jason Botterill is the guy that will be the GM of the team, but we need a head coach. And I haven't really heard many names in terms of who their next head coaching candidate will be. But for their head coaching, list, I've made it pretty clear who I want. I want Phil Housley, former Buffalo Sabre, U.S. great, a great American hockey player, one of the greatest U.S.-born players in NHL history, holds career milestone records for games played, which was recently broken by Mike Modano, not really recently, but within the last 10 years. So, this is a guy that also played the most games without winning a Stanley Cup. So he's on the precipice of getting there with the Nashville Predators as an assistant coach. I hope he gets that cup, leaves, gets a head coaching job, and comes to Buffalo and helps bring the Sabres back to respectability. That'd be a great story. Obviously, it would be a greater story if they still had Pat LaFontaine running the show, two former Sabres players making the Sabres great again. That would be pretty awesome, but that's not the case. We'll never really know the true details of that Pat LaFontaine situation, but pretty obvious. I'm pretty willing to say that the obvious was the fact that Tim Murray sent Ryan Miller packing, and Pat LaFontaine did not want that to happen. So he decided to just part ways with the organization itself and say, you didn't listen to me. Why am I here? I'll move on. So that's what he did. But back to today, Jason Botterill, the new GM of the Buffalo Sabres. I'm very excited. He was ranked on NHL.com as the top best fit for the Buffalo Sabres, and he was the guy they brought in. So I'm very excited to see how this pans out. More so excited to see who they decide to bring in as the next head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. Most Sabres fans are saying Lindy Ruff and all these names that are not ready to be head coaches yet at the AHL level. I'm willing to bring in a guy that has experience as a head coach or as a coach, has experience as a player, that has been a successful assistant coach. I would love to see Lindy Ruff come back. It would be a pretty cool story, but I don't think that would be the best fit for the Sabres currently. That day and age, that era of Lindy Ruff being the head coach of the Sabres is gone. So that is my take on the Buffalo Sabres hiring of Jason Botterill and much, much more. I think Botterill will do a fantastic job. All signs point to the fact that Botterill is the right guy to make the Sabres a winner again. And I like that he understands the dynamic between Rochester and Buffalo, being that he was a former Rochester American. They had some great teams while he was there in Rochester during the Sabres heyday in the mid-2000s, 2003, 2004, 2005. Really, Botterill was a part of the Sabres organization at one of the darkest points in club history, where the team was undergoing bankruptcy issues. So he knows how much this team means to the area. He knows how much the Rochester Americans mean to the area. I'm very excited. I feel like Terry brought in a one Buffalo guy. So thank you guys for tuning in. If I were to say which hire I am most excited for, though, it would be Brandon Beane. You look at what he has brought in besides himself, Brian Gain and Joe Shane, obviously Sean McDermott. I think that team is going to work in unison now, and we are going to start to see better drafts from the Buffalo Bills. Take care, guys. Thank you for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast today. As I said, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com right now. Type in on the search bar, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Click subscribe. You'll get access to every single episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. And by liking the Facebook page, you will also get access to the Thomas Take articles. Thank you, and have a great night.